we really just allowing a certain elect few of us to move out of the ghettos into the suburbs so that they could live the lives of whites while still not being white? Are rappers the modern day house Negroes? What I mean by that is, are rappers simply just trying to escape from the plantation and using the narratives of the struggle of the plantation to find themselves into the master's house? It has been said that hip-hop culture, particularly the wing of sensational rap music that has pretty much swept the world by storm, is fundamentally a crucial aspect of the violence that has occurred in many spaces around the world, due to the fact that rap is pop music. It's, for all intensive purposes, today's most influential form of art. And with that being said, it is an undeniable canvas into the ghetto, into the lives of oppressed people, into visceral experiences which constantly reproduce this systemic violence. So as a result, we know that the metaphors and the poetry that comes from hip-hop are close to violence because they're embedded in it. But here's a question. Is rap music, with its expression of the violent black experience, something that reproduces the same violence that it supposedly purports to be against? It's a very important question, considering the climate of a tragedy that has struck South Africa. One of our favorite rappers, one of the greatest rappers arguably in the country, has passed away not due to anything haphazard, but a very clearly intended shooting. No conspiracies around who or what may be, but the one thing we do know is that that instance is a symptomatic expression of the society we live in at large, but particularly South African society as it exists. So with this video essay, I want to speak to my South Africans first and foremost, but I also want to speak to the rest of the world. I just want to speak to fans of hip-hop who have, with growing in the culture, come to love and commit and invest in this beautiful art form we call rap. I want to ask this very important question that has been asked in very different ways over the years. We've had people protesting rap because they felt it was thoroughly degenerative and a plague to society. We've had people who have been apologetics of rap, simply explaining that through an empathetic lens, you're able to understand that the violence rappers speak of isn't something that they pull out of some kind of imaginative void. It's an expression of the fact that rappers often come from communities of great engineered struggle. They come from places where people have been deliberately fixed in circumstances that are limited and cramped and suffocating, and as a result this creates a mass hysteria of violence where people are put in this extreme sense of survival mode. And what the survival mode does is that it cuts this very innate sense of social cohesion, and it creates this immediate sense of getting by any means necessary, even if it means sacrificing your neighbor, your brother and your sister to get that cheese. Now, you are rarely to find somebody who doesn't have in their list of great rappers an MC who in some way or the other carries the poetry of the hood in ways that directly tell hood narratives. Whether you're talking about MCs from the States itself, from the UK, other parts of Europe, and of course the continent, Africa, hip-hop has been followed by this lingering dark shadow of the violence that it is born in. So is this shadow something that moves with us everywhere we go, in the sense that we cannot rid ourselves of the embodiment of our own annihilation from this capitalist, industrialist whiteness as it oppresses us? In simple terms, is rap music a problem in and of itself? I want to focus on that question by starting out with the fact that going into the history of rap, we understand that these are fundamentally poets and storytellers of experiences that are pretty fundamental to a lot of what is wrong in the world. Rap music has been a lens for the forgotten. Rap music has been a mirror to those who are privileged in ways where they might not understand just how difficult some people's lives are. And those some people happen to be fundamentally these people who have been typecast, labeled, and defined under this term black. Now I want to go into this idea of blackness just for a while. When we think of black, a whole lot of us have this surface definition that it just means people of a darker hue. So whether somebody is in Australia, in Asia, or in Africa itself, being darker skinned qualifies you as being black. But a closer look at this has us look that in certain areas of the world, you find people who, in their darker hued complexion, navigate the world without this label or attempt to somehow live outside of the context of it. So when we really look at the essence of what blackness has meant, we see that it was an idea created by the Western colonial powers as they sought to suppress cultures which they wanted to conquer. And in order to conquer a people, you must give them a definition of themselves which allows them to stay in the prism of imprisonment. In other words, blackness is a label that gives death to those who once had a life in and of themselves. So yes, it was given unto the dark-skinned peoples of the world, but the variations of skin tone are in and of itself a political aspect of how blackness has plotted itself through the diaspora. For instance, with blackness must come whiteness. Because when they created the black, they wanted the white to remain as a contrast of that. So in other words, the black is the evil, the black is the one that deserves shame, the black is the one that will never come into the light, the black is the one that is essentially dead. And the white is essentially the life. It is the positivity, it is the progress. So it is this fundamental ideology that really, in as simple as I could possibly explain it, defines what blackness and whiteness is. And both go hand in hand. Because with whiteness, this idea that there is an elite group of people who by virtue of their skin tone and their ancestry are warranted to being governors and controllers of the world as we know it, comes the idea that everybody else, particularly those of a darker skin tone, should be suppressed under that. Now, hip-hop comes into the fold as part of this wave of history, and we've had song after song that have become part of the soundtrack of how oppressed people try to find a sense of empowerment. And we've addressed this complex conflict of how we're still trying to find a sense of revelation within this very same whiteness that oppressed us to begin with. So as a result, when NWA said fuck the police and they cashed a check from that, they managed to speak to the rebellion of white children in suburbia. They managed to speak to this innermost feeling that other peoples might have, that the law is somehow not on their side. But ultimately, they were not politicized to understand just how their message and what they reap from that message is playing into the very same predicament that creates a condition where you can say fuck the police to begin with. So this is the double bind that rappers find themselves in. If we are going to lambast about the ghetto and the struggle until we get money from people who want to support us because they relate to our narratives, then when we do with that money the very same thing that allows for the system that created the struggle we spoke about to persist, are we not creating a self-fulfilling cycle of destruction? Are rappers who have sold drugs and tell stories of selling drugs as maybe some kind of metaphor for coming up in general, aggressively having the ambition to do whatever it takes to find yourself in a place of sustainability. Are these narratives not reinforcing the idea to listeners and audiences, especially those who are young, impressionable, and still need direction? Are they not giving the impression that if we are to succeed as oppressed people, it's going to have to be an individualistic process where you do whatever it takes, even if it means going against your community, even if it means selling drugs to the brother next to you, even though you know that the reason they're probably an addict is the very same system that you want to escape from? Now, this is a very important question, because if rappers are going to keep cashing in and becoming millionaires on the blood of the very same system that had them painfully adjust themselves into this art form in the first place, then what are we really doing here? Are we really just allowing a certain elect few of us to move out of the ghettos into the suburbs so that they could live the lives of whites while still not being white? Are rappers the modern day house Negroes? What I mean by that is, are rappers simply just trying to escape from the plantation and using the narratives of the struggle of the plantation to find themselves into the master's house? It's a very, very important question. And if you feel like you want to engage with me on this question, talk to me in the comments section. But I want to go into the second chapter of this question, because there could be many answers for it, and I want to theorize a couple of them just so that we can get this conversation cultivated and possibly have a sense of what could possibly be going on. So let's zap it back into South Africa. One of the greatest rappers that we have ever witnessed is shot dead walking out of a nightclub, and beyond the particular reasons, we know the fact that there are guns moving around in ways where they can easily be in the hands of assassins is a systematic expression of just how detrimental the condition of our country really is. And I mean, this isn't anything new. We've had news journalists hijacked on camera. We constantly see viral videos of people getting shot, murdered, or hijacked in petrol filling stations, in spaza shops. The truth is, we've become enemies to ourselves and enemies to each other, because again, we've been driven into the survival mode where many, especially in a country that is still healing from the wounds of an unresolved political climate, where many fought to try and return a sense of their own identity through getting their land back, and as a result trying to find themselves in a place where they could reconstruct their communities, only to be met with a compromise that only gave them proximity, open gates to formerly white institutions, but still kept the same institutions and pretty much the same infrastructure of the apartheid government. This created a massive influx of disgruntled activists who were funneled into the underground and moved with weapons that they had in their possession in days of fighting for the struggle. And the narrative of how these guerrillas turned everyday township citizens were able to engineer new businesses while still being part of some kind of criminal underworld is the classic story of every ghetto. But I want to get to how rap plays into this. Rap is popular because it plays into the idea of hypermasculinity. We live in a world that is governed primarily by men with power. White men with power, and under them the rest of men who want to navigate a sort of power, including black men. Now, rap speaks overtly to the voices of men who have felt weakened. Men who have felt that the world is literally against them. Men who have felt that they need to repossess, they need to avenge their own culture, their history, and dominate. And this is why these tones of anger permeate through almost every rap song, and they're able to easily pass by as messages of aspiration. I mean, sure, you're able to chant, "Whose world is this? The world is yours," and listen to Nas and feel like that's a general message that appeals to everybody. But when you look at the lyrics, that is a chant that is a mantra for the dispossessed black who wants to really re-engineer the world, literally speaking. These are cries of revolution. And quite often than not, when the rappers who cry these warlike messages that instigate people into a sense of inspiration have mobilized the masses, capitalism neatly swoops in and integrates that message into the context of pop culture. So now the world is yours with a bottle of Coca-Cola, as an example. So the placement of products that persist the destruction is what is used to allow rap music to echo the very same issues of psychological and physical unwellness that reigns rapid amongst the communities. Listen, I'm not here to try and narrow down rap to some kind of moralist stance. I myself am a firm believer that we're not benevolent in our innate nature as human beings. What we are is fundamentally selfish creatures which are designed to work together only for the purposes of individual benefit. But I want to say, if we understand the condition that we're in, and we are inspired by rap music to get us into a better mood so that we can face the world and ourselves, then isn't being responsible a part of that? Just like it is a part of everything else. Shouldn't we be more harsh on rappers who say they used to sell drugs and yet still speak of this very same drug life only to bolster their image and appear as this tough guy that a hyper-masculine capitalist brand can use? Isn't it convenient that Pusha T can be a metaphor for a drug slinger and he can still give us gun and drug bars that are supposedly not in any way related to the actual movement of narcotics, and yet he can still be the brand ambassador for a McDonald's? See, this is the conflict we find ourselves in. And I think if rap is going to go into a better condition, it starts with the artist being more responsible, that if you're gonna use metaphors of violence, then what are you using them for? If you're gonna use a gun as a symbol for power, who are you shooting at? What are you saying? What are you encouraging? What kind of war? What kind of defending? Who are you defending yourself against? I don't think rap has asked itself this question lately. Because when we look at the roots of hip-hop, movements like the Zulu Nation, movements that like the Temple of Hip-Hop, which is an extension of that, the eras of the native tongues, the coming together of different rap movements which sought to literally stop the violence, were directly, explicitly telling the masses that when we talk about guns, we're pointing them at those who have them pointed against us systematically. When we're talking about the drugs, we're not going to sell them anymore. What we're going to do is use the music to create better businesses. When we're talking about the street life, what we're going to do now is galvanize that military spirit that comes from being in the street and use it for better purposes. Is that too much to ask for? I don't think it's being quote-unquote conscious to do this, because I don't think there is anybody who is unconscious. I think we are all conscious of our situation and we're doing the best we can with it. So I think that labels like conscious hip-hop are yet another trick that capitalism uses to create the impression that there are those who know and those who don't know, when we all know what it's like to struggle in varying degrees. So this isn't a call for rappers to be conscious. This is just a call for rappers to be responsible with their words, and for rappers to not act like they're not part of the problem when the violence that they seem or pretend to not be promoting persists. How are your metaphors not expanding that when it seems as if all they're doing is motivating people to build capitalism, when capitalism in and of itself is violence? So a rapper who promotes capitalism is a rapper who's promoting violence. I'm talking to every rapper out there, the global ones and the local ones. Is it possible for us to be in a place where we consciously tap into better narratives? Or are we just selfish motherfuckers who are going to tell the stories of the streets only to get our own little soft lives and then navigate ourselves outside of the struggle and still pretend to speak for the ones that are beneath, quote unquote? Jay-Z once famously said he couldn't help the poor if he was one of them. And now he isn't. And he's still not helping the poor. At least not in fundamentally life-changing ways. Giving people in the streets Bitcoin is not going to save anything, Hove. There's real struggles on the ground that need a mobilization of community. So without going into those that are doing the work and those that aren't, I want to pose the question to everybody who claims to love hip-hop, to everybody who claims to love rap music. How can we be more responsible for our words and our actions in times where it feels as if we're reproducing the same cycle we claim not to want? So if anybody is to die amongst us, whether they be a rapper, a breakdancer, a graffiti artist, I really think we have ourselves to blame. Ultimately. Because if we claim that rap is a medium that is there to conscientize, I don't see it. I don't see it in the midst of the hyper-branding, the hyper-masculinity. I don't think that if I peer through enough booties, I'll see the revelation. I don't think that beneath the strip clubs is something that's going to boil and build us out of this immediate sense of self-gratification. And again, this is not a call for so-called consciousness. It's just a call for being responsible. Many of us have children. Many of us still want to have children. Many of us want families. We emulate and idolize rappers with families. We look at the Jay-Z's and Beyonce's, but are they really our standards? Many would say, rappers are not our leaders, but come on fam, anybody who becomes an artist in the limelight and a public figure by default becomes somebody many are influenced by. So being a leader isn't necessarily something you scream out of the mountaintops and make yourself available for. It's something people see in you by being influential to values they feel you embody. So what are these values that are embodied in the rapper? I ask this question. And to end it off, I don't think AKA literally meant that that's what should happen when he said they're trying to take shots at Mega. I think that was a metaphor. But if that was a metaphor for throwing hate, then maybe that's where the problem lies. Maybe the hate is what gives birth to the eventual guns. Maybe if people are taking shots at you, metaphorically speaking, that's not too far from taking shots at you, literally. I don't know. All I know is that something's got to change. My name is Vijay, the brother from the ancient mother. I hope this hasn't been too gloomy, because what I'm hoping to do is create a hopeful dialogue for fans of the culture, for fans of the art form of rap, to really talk about the issues that are at the bases of culture. How long will we just watch as certain people devise at the design for what our culture becomes? Will we take it in our own hands and start moving? It's the Headspace. Please subscribe. We do this for Africa. We do this for the rest of the world. We do this for hip hop.